Once in a while, a watch comes along that makes you do a double take. It's not so certain at first why you paused and took another look. Is it the dial? The hands perhaps? Maybe even the colors? It isn't clear at first why you had to stop, but as you keep looking at it, you can't help but lust after it. Hello, and my name is Martin, and I have a lust for watches. Today, we are going to take a closer look at the Silent Service by Ginault. A lot of us look at many different watches, and I've come across a few and had the fortune to even handle some so-called luxury pieces. However, I've never handled one quite like the Ginault Silent Service. I was drawn to this watch at first by finding out about the watch preceding it, the Ocean Rover, and its second generation release. It has a navy blue ceramic bezel and a high gloss enamel dial. It looked like a fine watch, but I couldn't help but keep going back to the Silent Service. Silent Service is in reference to the submarine services of nations, and I suppose it has something to do with the submersible aspect of the watch. Some of you may be familiar with the video game, TV show, and or even possibly the animation. However, nothing about the watch says silent. If anything, it's a blazing eye catcher, and you would notice this thing from across the street. From the sapphire bezel to the large contrasting trapezoid indices filled with lume, and the overabundance of fine glossy text. There's no shortage of attention-grabbing factors. To the specs. The watch comes in multiple flavors. You can choose whether to have a 60-minute diver or a 12-hour traveler 120-click unidirectional bezel. You can also decide to have no date, or a date, or even a date with Cyclops. Prices range currently for Phase 2 pre-order at $11.49 to $13.99 USD. And after the pre-order, it will be $14.99 to $17.99 USD. For complete disclosure, I did purchase this watch at Phase 1 and paid $10.39 USD. The dimensions of the watch measure 41mm in diameter, 20mm lug width, 47mm wingspan, and 12mm in depth. Overall, great set of dimensions as it's not too thick nor too wide for everyday wear. The weight comes in at 140 grams, so it's not light, but it's not the heaviest either. The dial has a lot going for it, and I mean that both figuratively and literally. It is packed. At the top, first the logo, then the text of Ginault, then the super long kinetic continuous. At the bottom half, we get Silent Service in red, then 1,000 feet, 300 meters, then submersible maritime, and finally precision chronometer. And just to make sure there wouldn't be anyone to complain there wasn't enough text, they added hand-built in America at the very bottom of the dial. That's exactly 7 lines of text with 3 font sizes used and all in uppercase. Normally, this would be a bit excessive and would cause me to roll over at night with sweat streaming down, but frankly, overall, the text is so tiny, other than the logo, that you hardly ever notice it when you're looking at the dial. What's more impressive is how the glossy finish of the text shines up when the light hits it just right, so that it just seems to make it stand out a little bit more from the dial. There is a sandpaper dial, but the grain is so small that without a macro lens it's hard to notice even during high noon. It's pretty much naked to the invisible eye, but it does help diffuse the light on the dial, preventing it from reflecting and making it hard to read. The bezel is the one single point that really differentiates this watch from all other watches at this price. There's a quality to the clicks that is not matched by any other watch in my collection. It's clicky for sure, but it also has just that right amount of dampening to it so it doesn't feel hollow and or empty. Think of hitting an empty vessel, but the vessel contains a bit of liquid or some heavy sponge that's absorbing the hits ever so slightly so that you don't really notice it, but you can hear and feel it. It has a bit of a grip to it so that when you get near a click, it sort of slides into place, but ever so gently. I guess another way I can put it is, if you ever used a cabinet door, some of them have hinges with their slowed friction glide, and it snaps shut at the last moment. It just glides into the next click, but not all at once. There's slight feedback to build up before it goes over into a click. The bezel isn't so sticky that you couldn't do it with one finger, and I do find that it does get moved around, whether it be the kids or some clothing getting snagged by it. Very little backplay to speak of. Overall, a very well made bezel. The sapphire aspect of the bezel also just makes the watch shine above other bezels, and mix that in with the lume, and you have a really nice see-through effect. As I mentioned in my intro, the watch just made me stop and pause to admire it, and I feel like it has something to do with the sword hour hand. The minute hand has no flair to it and simply has a point to it, but coupled with the sword hand, it just seems to work well together. They aren't too big or too small. They go right up to where they need to without it looking awkward or neglected. The second hand is simple and ordinary. Other than it being red, there's really nothing different about it. I do find the edges of the hands a bit lacking, and it's easy to spot where there wasn't enough paint put on the second hand, and how there's some burrs on the edges of the main hands, indicating a lack of polish and refinement. However, you really need to be looking at macro shots to be able to tell. Looking at the case, you'll notice it has a brushed top that has a grain going along towards the inside of the lugs, a detail that's easily lost but helps bring together a cohesive design. With that, along the top there's a slight bevel that follows the top edge and begins to flare out as it gets closer to the lug tips. It has polished sides and a fat sign crown, which has a very similar grip to the bezel grip, and is signed with the Ginault flower logo. The case back is unadorned and has laser etching to tell you the brand and the water depth rating and materials. The underside of each lug also shows additional bevels to prevent sharp edges. There is one bevel at the very end of the lug, and there is one other bevel at the outside corner to help it from digging into your arm. As each watch is hand-built and finished, there is always a bit of variance between each watch, so you'll have to note that what you get may be slightly different from what you have seen or handled before. The watch uses Ginault glowing Smurfs lume and is comparable to Super Luminova BGW9 and is applied in ample amounts over each indice and on each hand, including a circular fill on the second hand. Also, the numbers and markers underneath the sapphire bezel are all lumed for great illumination, even at the darkest of times. The watch comes on a stainless steel bracelet in the typical 3-link oyster style, and it does have a glide lock style adjustment on the deploying clasp, which is quite handy when you need to adjust it on the go. The main appeal of the bracelet is the build quality, as it oozes confidence and has a tactility to it which isn't seen in this price bracket. And everything sounds great, well, until you actually use it. The downside is that you will want to open up the clasp to properly access the glide mechanism, without it being too cumbersome to adjust. The deployant clasp itself is on the thicker end at 7.5 millimeters. It has some very hard edges, making it feel generic and uninspired. Now, if you compare the edges on it to some other brands, such as, well, Pagani Design even, Miltat, Zelos, Christopher Ward, you can see that the clasps on these other brands have a bevel on the edge to help round the corners off. But on the Ginault, you have a 90-degree edge that aesthetically matches the bracelet, but leaves room for desiring comfortability and a higher quality of finish at this price range. There is a mixture of half and full links, and with the glide lock adjustment, it should be right at home on any wrist. With screwed-in links, any link adjustment should be doable at home, and it certainly helps that the screw heads are large at 2 millimeters. It is a missed opportunity to leave the bracelet unsigned, and I feel the next step for the brand will be to emboss the logo onto the clasp buckle or even etch the name into the inside of the clasp itself. I do think perhaps it is possibly related to purchasing the bands from a third party, and so it would be easier to leave it unbranded. And we'll speak on this a little bit more later. So what are the pros? Well, first off, it has to be the looks. It's not everyone's cup of tea for sure, but when you look at the watch, objectively, you can't help but keep looking at it. It's what got me, and it's what makes me reach for it over and over again. It's definitely a homage style watch, and so if you are anti-homage, then it probably isn't for you. But most watch enthusiasts can agree to a point that most watches are an homage to one or more watches. It's very rare to get an all-original design, and then I can understand why. It's a design language that's been cultivated and perfected over time, and like anything that ages well, it just keeps getting better. The hands and indices are most comparable to the Omega Seamaster 300mm spec. And the case is a classic Rolex Submariner without the crown guards. And it's closer to the older style than the newer Super case, as the lugs simply aren't as thick. Aesthetically, it's part vintage inspired and part modern elegance with twists like the bezel grip and blocky indices. The sapphire bezel only adds to its modernization and gives it a nice polish to go along with the polished edges of the indices to contrast against the matte sand finish dial. The splashes of red found on the seconds hand and the watch type silent service goes classically well with the black elements found on the dial and bezel. The blue lume also handsomely accompanies the watch and takes it to the modern realm even in the dark. Overall, it's not just the aesthetics, but also the quality that cannot be denied. Anyone that has handled the silent service will instantly tell you that the watch is a high-quality timepiece and is comparable and possibly even better finished than watches above its price. It also helps that the dimensions are in that sweet spot of 40mm wide and 12mm of thickness. Oftentimes, too many modern watches go for 42 or 44 width, and it feels just a hair too wide. And the thickness being at 12mm, if you ever try to watch thicker than 12mm, you'll know it tends to be top-heavy and seems to always get in the way of custom bag straps. Having a lug width of 20mm also helps its versatility, as you're able to fit it with straps from the most popular lug spacing. Having no date is actually a good thing. I've got a date on most watches and appreciate the simplicity of a three-handed watch, and not having to correct the date either after the watch runs out of juice or if the month has less than 31 days. So this is definitely a pro for me. Now let's talk cons. As I mentioned before, the bracelet is unadorned and unsigned, and this leads to the elephant in the room, which is the Ginault controversy. In short, it's been rumored that the owner of the brand, John, had been in the business of making, well, fake watches, primarily Rolex knockoffs. Now, there's a few ways someone can take this. 1. Curse at the brand forever and simply say no. 2. Ignore the controversies and keep your head in the sand. And 3. Accept that people change and could possibly change for the better. There's no definite evidence to suggest anything, and it's all rumor mongering, but it is something that has always plagued the brand from its onset. Now, leaving the bracelet unsigned does make me raise my eyebrows, and I do wonder if the bracelets are being purchased from a third party that also happens to make bracelets for knockoff Rolex watches. Now, why wouldn't you put your logo on the bracelet? No, it just puzzles me and makes you wonder what's really going on behind the scenes. Provided Ginault simply keeps making quality timepieces, I think eventually no one will care. Perhaps the company will sign their bracelets in the future and look to shake off any remnants of its possible shady past. If the general masses can overlook watch companies having made watches for the Nazi regime and of watch brands supporting cruelty to animals, then I can't see why anyone would care about the past of a small watchmaker. As for the actual cons of the watch itself, well, the one thing that stands out the most is that some of the edges could be considered sharp. I found it especially sharp on the top of the insides of the lugs and had to buff it out with a bit of polishing cloth. When I ran my fingertips over the top of it, it would leave white scratch marks on my fingers, and I found this to be disappointing even at this price. The edges of the bottom of the side profiles could also have used a bit of beveling. It doesn't ever really dig into my wrist as it lays flat, but just handling the watch, you do notice the sharpness of it, and I feel it would have been a good match to the beveling you have at the top profile edge. This could be a con for some, but maybe not for others, but the movement inside is a Sellita SW200-1 Elaborate grade, regulated in-house over 6 weeks. It's not COSC, and it doesn't claim to be, and Ginault does provide you with a bit of paperwork to show you the work that's been done, and it does its job admirably, and as a clone to the ETA 2824, it is easy to service and or possibly replace should the need arise. My watch is running 2 seconds plus or minus, so the regulation does keep pace and lasts from my experience so far after 6 months. It does have a ghost state position, so if that bothers you, then please take note of it now. I don't find this a negative in any way and find it strange that people take issue with this, so take it or leave it as it is. Of course, this wouldn't be an issue if you purchased the version with the date. Another con is that being an Homage watch isn't easy. Half the people hate you before they even meet you, and the other half love you for what the other half hate you for. It never is easy being compared to other watches, but I feel like the Silent Service has made greater strides in having its own design when compared to the Ocean Rover. I'm personally impartial to the Homage debate. I do own quite a few of them. My watch collecting philosophy has always been buy it if you like it, and if it puts people's panties into a twist, then so be it. Wear what you like, you do you, and I'll do me. Would I ever replace the watch again? One question to ask yourself if you really like a watch is if you would ever replace a broken or lost watch. And the short answer is yes. If I were to ever lose this timepiece or break it, I would purchase the watch again, even at a higher cost. Hopefully by then there's a second generation of it like the Ocean Rover with improvements like a signed bracelet and improved case finishing. Now the watch does pair beautifully with straps. Here it is on black leather. Here it is on suede. This is more black leather. And here is a Miltat Asteroid QR. And this is a ostrich from Hirsch. This is brown leather. And here's more dark brown leather. And those were both Barton's. This is mesh. And more black leather. And this is on a rubber strap from Barton as well. And another rubber strap, also from Barton. More black leather. And more black leather. If you aren't afraid to take a bit of a risk in your watch purchasing, then I would recommend the Ginault Silent Service. Those that should reconsider purchasing this watch are those that already have ample red and black divers in their collection. Even though I am part of that group already, I still actually really enjoy this watch, and am guilty of neglecting some of the others since the introduction of the silent service to my collection. Whether it be due to the attractiveness of the watch or the quality you get, it's definitely a watch to keep an eye on if you're in the market for such a watch. It would be a great watch to pick up secondhand, though I don't think they stay on the market for very long. Whether it be for good or bad, the brand is certainly infamous for its possible shady past and the quality you get as it punches way above its price tag and puts more luxury brand watches to shame. Thank you for watching to the end, and let me know in the comments what you think of the watch. Also, if you own the watch, comment below whether you agree or disagree with me. If you like this video and would like to see more, you know what to do. Until next time, keep it real. Bye bye.